Back in 2007, I rented a house through this new thing called Airbnb. At the time it wasn't like it is now, just a handful of listings, and honestly it felt more like gambling than booking a place. I wasn't a fan of hotels though, too many people, too much noise. I wanted somewhere quiet to spend a week with my daughter Sophie. She was 6 years old, full of energy and questions. I figured a house would give us some breathing room. The listing was simple, charming 2-bedroom farmhouse, peaceful, private, perfect for families. The photos showed an old house surrounded by trees with a wraparound porch and a swing hanging from a branch in the front yard. It looked perfect, exactly what we needed. When we pulled up, I thought it looked even better than the pictures. The house had this kind of faded charm, like something out of an old movie. Sophie immediately ran to the swing, her little sneakers kicking up dirt as she laughed. Inside, the place smelled faintly of wood and age, like it had been there forever. The furniture was old but sturdy, and the walls were lined with faded wallpaper covered in tiny flowers. It wasn't modern, but it felt homey. I unpacked while Sophie explored, her voice echoing through the house as she called out every little thing she found. That first night I made spaghetti and we ate at the small kitchen table. Sophie was unusually quiet, picking at her food. I asked her if everything was okay, and she shrugged. "I saw a lady," she said suddenly, her voice small. I stopped mid-bite. "What do you mean? Outside?" Sophie shook her head. "No, she was inside. She was upstairs looking out the window." She waved at me. Now look, I'm not the kind of guy who believes in ghosts or anything like that. I just assumed she'd seen her reflection or maybe some shadow. Kids have vivid imaginations, and I wasn't about to freak her out. "Well, maybe it was a shadow," I said, keeping my tone light. "Nothing to worry about, okay?" Sophie didn't look convinced, but she nodded and went back to her spaghetti. The second night things got weird. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard Sophie's voice from down the hall. She was talking to someone. I got up, groggy and annoyed, and made my way to her room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her little feet swinging, and she was looking at the corner of the room. "Sophie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "who are you talking to?" She turned to me, her eyes wide. "The lady," she said. My stomach dropped. "What lady?" "The one who lives here. She says her name is Mrs. Miller. She misses her garden." I froze. That wasn't something Sophie could have made up, the name, the garden. It was too specific. My mind raced as I tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe she'd heard the name somewhere. Maybe it was written down in the house. I sat down next to her. "Sophie, what else did she say?" Sophie frowned. "She said her husband hurt her, he hurt her really bad, and now she can't leave." The next morning I did some digging. I found a dusty old bookshelf in the living room with a few local history books. One of them was about the town's notable families. That's where I found her, Elizabeth Miller, beloved gardener and community member, 1935 to 1997. There was a black and white photo of her standing in front of a massive flower bed, smiling. I felt sick. I spent the rest of the day trying to keep Sophie occupied. We went to a park and grabbed ice cream, anything to get her out of the house. But as the sun started to set, she got restless. "She's waiting for me," Sophie said, her tone matter-of-fact. "No she's not," I said, maybe a little too sharply. "There's no one here but us." Sophie just looked at me like she knew something I didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house set me on edge. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. "Sophie?" I called out, my voice shaking. No response. I got up, my heart pounding, and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but Sophie's door was open. I stepped inside. She was standing by the window, looking out into the yard. "Sophie, what are you doing?" I said, rushing over to her. "She's outside now," Sophie said. "She's pointing at something." I looked out the window, but there was nothing there, just the swing swaying slightly in the breeze. "Come on," I said, pulling her away from the window. "We're leaving tomorrow, okay? First thing in the morning." Sophie didn't argue. I didn't wait for the morning. By 5 a.m. we were packed and in the car. Sophie was quiet the whole ride home, and I didn't press her. But something kept nagging at me. When we got back, I called the local police department and asked if there had ever been any incidents at the house. At first they wouldn't tell me anything, but I mentioned Elizabeth Miller. The line went quiet for a moment, then the officer sighed. "Her death was ruled an accident," he said. "But there were rumors. People thought her husband might have had something to do with it. She fell down the stairs, but, well, let's just say the evidence didn't all line up." That was all I needed to hear. A week later I got a call from the same officer. He sounded different this time, more serious. "We reopened the case," he said. "Turns out there was a lot we missed back then. Her husband, well, let's just say he won't be hurting anyone else." Apparently they found blood evidence hidden under the stairs, as well as some of Elizabeth's personal belongings buried in the garden, things that shouldn't have been buried. Her husband confessed after a long interrogation. It's been years since then, and I've tried to forget about that house. Sophie doesn't remember much about what happened, and I've never brought it up. I was in 6th grade and I went to school at Riverside Academy, Boston, which is one of the oldest schools in the country. I'm still enrolled in that school and I have been since kindergarten. I've pretty much befriended everyone in my grade throughout all the years, only this one guy made me question why I came to this school in the first place. His name was Mike and he was new to the school that year. At first he seemed well-mannered, but you can't always underthink. He would sit next to me in all of my classes and would sit at the same table I was at lunch. I wasn't too sure if he liked me or if he just wanted to be friends with me, but I wasn't too worried about it. After some time he asked for my number and I gave it to him, thinking he wouldn't be creepy over text. He was normal at first, talking about school-related stuff and current events that are going on in the world. The texts and calls were normal at first, but one day he asked me out. To be real, I wasn't surprised because I was expecting him to do it at some point, but I didn't know when. I wasn't offended when he asked me, but I politely declined his invitation. After I did this, he ended the call right away. I hope that I didn't hurt his feelings, but everyone takes things in different ways. I texted him saying, "I'm sorry, Mike, I just don't like you like that." He didn't respond back the whole night. The next day then came and we had school. When I saw Mike in school, I tried to talk to him, hoping to sort things out, but he would just ignore me and walk away. I must have really hurt his feelings, but I was still not going to give him what he wanted. The rest of the day went by and he would continuously avoid me. I went home that night on the school bus and I noticed that Mike was staring at me from outside when I was sitting down. He looked really cross. I decided right there that I would no longer try to talk to him until he apologized and let me know that he would move on from this. The next day then came. During the hours in the early morning, I was told by one of my teachers that I had to go to the principal's office. I was so confused because what could I have possibly done this time? I got to the office and the principal told me to have a seat. I listened to him and asked him if I was in trouble. He said, "I was informed that you have been cyberbullying Ryan and Dylan." Those were 2 kids in my grade. I was so bewildered by hearing this, and I defended myself and assured him that I did not cyberbully them. He then said that he had proof, so he pulled out a piece of paper from his desk and showed me a photo of messages cyberbullying Ryan and Dylan through text. I was so astounded seeing this, and I told the principal that this was photoshopped. He then said to me that I had 24 hours to prove that this was fake, and if it's not, I will be suspended for 2 weeks. I had to think fast and take steps quickly. I took a picture of the paper and then left the office. At lunchtime I went over to Ryan and Dylan. They were both sitting at the same table. I grabbed both of them and said I needed them right now. They both squinted their eyes as they obviously didn't know why I needed them. I told them that Mike spread a rumor that I was bullying you too. They had such confused expressions on their face as they didn't know what I was talking about. I then pulled out my phone and showed them the picture. After they saw the photo and examined it, their faces turned to horror. Ryan then asked me why would he do something like that to you? What did you do to him? I simply didn't do anything, I responded back. He asked me to go out with him and I nicely rejected him, and I guess he didn't take so kindly to this. So I continued on. I felt disgusted saying this to them because it was just plainly embarrassing. Dylan then said we need to go to the office now. We got to the principal's office and both Ryan and Dylan declared that I was not cyberbullying them, and they proved it by showing the principal the text message history between them, and our conversations did not show anything bullying related. The principal seemed to catch on to what we were saying and he apologized to me for not believing me at first. He also said that I'm clear and won't face trouble. We all thanked him and we all left the room, continuing with our day. Later that night I got an email from the assistant principal saying that Mike had been suspended for a week for spreading misinformation about me cyberbullying other students. I was joyful to hear this because I wouldn't have to run into him at school and be targeted for something I didn't do. Hopefully he will come back more mature and own up to the mistakes that he made. Sad to say that this wasn't what I thought it was. The weekend then came and I was on my way home from dance class. I was on my block walking alone on my phone when I was suddenly interrupted by a loud "Hey." I turned my head to see who it was, and to my fear it was none other than Mike. I was so stunned to see him in my neighborhood. How did he even know where I lived? The school didn't allow handbooks for families that would have home addresses on them, and my school was in downtown Boston and I lived in the suburbs. I took a few steps back, feeling unsettled. I calmly asked Mike, "How did you even find me?" He then snapped at me and said, "So you're just not going to go out with me? I was planning this ever since I first met you, and this is how you're going to treat me?" I was about to lose it, but I remained cool because I did not want to make a scene. I said to Mike, "I wasn't even being mean to you. You just overreacted when I said no, when you spread lies about me which almost got me suspended, and now you're stalking me when I never even told you where I lived. You've gone too far." He still was yelling at me, saying stuff like how I was being a jerk to him and how I mistreated him, which I never did. In fact, he then put his fists out like he was going to punch me. I started yelling for help because I was being threatened. I was running away now and Mike was chasing me. I ran until I got to the building I lived in. I saw the doorman, and that's when Mike ran away from me. He probably knew that he was going to get caught. I got inside and the doorman asked me who that kid was. I said that this guy goes to my school and he was stalking me on my way home. He then asked if he needed to get the police involved. I told him no, it's fine, I can handle this, and I went upstairs to my apartment. I rushed inside and my parents were sitting at the dinner table. They saw the scared look on my face and they asked what the matter was. I told them that Mike, the one who spread lies that I was bullying other kids, somehow knew where I lived and he followed me home from dance class. Both of my parents were very alarmed to hear this, and my mother said that she would email the principal right away. It was hard for me to fall asleep that night knowing what happened a few hours ago. I was afraid that he never left and was still probably in my neighborhood waiting for me to come outside. Monday then came, and before the day could even start I was called into the principal's office. I was wishing that it would be good news, and it was. Mike had been expelled from school. This made me feel at ease, as he would no longer have to be following me everywhere I go and he would not have to harass me anymore. The rest of my middle school years went well and moved fast like the speed of light. I never had any stalker encounters ever again, and I hope it remains that way. I'll say this for those of you who are about to be in middle school: choose carefully the kids you want to hang out with, and if you don't choose right you might end up in the same situation I was in, if not even worse. When I was 37 I decided to attend my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport, rented a car and started the 35-minute drive to my hometown. The road led through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. It felt a little eerie driving through those empty fields and silent woods. About 3 miles outside of town I saw someone on the side of the road flagging me down. I slowed down and recognized the guy as Thomas, one of my old high school friends. We hadn't seen each other in 20 years, but he looked almost the same, just a bit older. Thomas climbed into the car and we started talking. We caught up on old times and laughed about some of the pranks we pulled back in school. It felt good to see a familiar face after so many years. As we approached town, I asked him if he wanted to come to the American Legion Hall for a drink with me. "No, just take me home," Thomas said. I remember that his parents used to live only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, so I turned in that direction, but Thomas stopped me saying, "Take me to the outskirts of town." There was a mobile home park out there and I figured that must be where he lived now. When we reached the turnoff, Thomas said, "Just drop me here. It was good to see you again." Then he got out and walked off into the night. I drove to the American Legion and met some of my old classmates. We started chatting about who was coming to the reunion. At some point I mentioned that I had just picked Thomas up 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Suddenly everyone got quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stopped and put down the microphone. My cousin, who was sitting next to me, went as white as a new t-shirt. "Barb, Thomas died on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral," someone said. I felt dizzy and lightheaded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mumbled something about needing some air and went out to the car to take a few deep breaths. I sat in the driver's seat trying to calm down. That's when I noticed the newspaper on the passenger seat. I picked it up and my heart nearly stopped. It was the local newspaper printed 8 years ago, and it had Thomas's obituary on the front page. I stared at it in disbelief, my hands shaking. The obituary confirmed what my classmates had said. Thomas had died in a car accident on that curve outside of town. The article described how he had lost control of his car and rolled it into a ditch. He had died on impact. I didn't know what to think. I had just seen Thomas, talked to him, and given him a ride. How could he be dead? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. I needed to know more, so I decided to visit Thomas's old house the next day. The next morning I drove to Thomas's parents' house. I knocked on the door and Thomas's mother answered. She looked older and worn down, the grief still evident in her eyes. I introduced myself and told her about the strange encounter I had the previous night. Her eyes widened and she invited me in. She explained that after Thomas died, many people claimed to have seen him around town, always near the place where he had crashed. Some thought it was just their imagination, while others believed it was Thomas's spirit unable to move on. I asked her if she had experienced anything herself. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes, and said, "Sometimes I feel his presence in the house. I hear his favorite song playing on the radio when it's not even on. It's like he's still here, watching over us." I left Thomas's house feeling a mixture of sadness and confusion. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Thomas and the strange encounter. I wondered if he had tried to tell me something, if there was a reason he had appeared to me. A few days later the reunion came to an end and I had to head back home. As I drove past the spot where I had picked Thomas up, I slowed down and looked around, but there was no one. I still have that old newspaper with Thomas's obituary. I keep it as a reminder of that strange night. Whenever I think about it, I get a feeling that there's more to this world than we can see or understand. Maybe Thomas just wanted to say goodbye, or maybe he had unfinished business. Whatever the reason, I'll never forget the night I gave a ride to my old friend Thomas and discovered that sometimes the past is closer than we think. This happened when I was in grade school, maybe around 9 or 10 years old. My house was about 3 or 4 miles from the school, and I usually walked home or took the bus. Most days we had recess outdoors and I'd play simple games with a few friends. Our playground was pretty big, and there was a long metal fence that separated it from the street. Cars would park along that fence, usually belonging to people who lived nearby or teachers who didn't use the main lot. Seeing cars there wasn't odd at all. One afternoon I was with 1 or 2 friends tossing a ball back and forth while other kids took turns with us. We were talking and laughing when out of the corner of my eye I spotted a man standing behind the fence. He was older, maybe 70 or 75, and had messy gray hair, but what really stood out was his suit. It was a fancy gray suit like something you'd wear to a wedding or a funeral. I instantly got a bad feeling, that little tingle in the pit of my stomach. He was pacing back and forth about 10 feet in each direction, never straying too far from an old sedan parked on the street. He never once looked at me directly, but I had this strange sense he was watching us kids very closely. Because he didn't speak or even try to come closer, I told myself I was just being silly. I tried to forget about him and kept playing. A few hours later school ended and I went home. My parents had plans to go out that evening, I forget where, and my mom asked me to fetch an umbrella from our car because the sky was turning dark. Our house sat on a small hill with a rock wall circling the front and a driveway leading up the side. I ran out to the car, grabbed the umbrella, and then turned to go back inside. That was when I saw him again. He was parked just beyond our house in the same old sedan. He had that same gray suit and the same unkempt hair. He was pacing along the sidewalk, walking about 10 or 15 feet then turning around and pacing back. It felt like my heart dropped into my stomach. What were the chances I'd see this man again on the same day? First at school, now in my neighborhood. I froze behind the car door for a moment, unsure of what to do. There were no cell phones back then, and I was scared to shout for my parents because he might notice me. Our front door was far enough away that they might not hear me anyway. My hands trembled as I clutched the umbrella, trying to keep quiet and hide behind the rock wall. Thunder rumbled overhead and a light rain began to fall. I peeked out and he kept pacing, his eyes scanning the area as if searching for something or someone. After what felt like ages, I decided I had to make a run for the front door. My parents would start wondering where I was. I waited until he took a few steps away from me, then I sprinted up the hill toward the house. I rushed inside, slammed the door and found my parents in the hallway. Shaking, I told them the whole story, the man at school, the same man now outside our house. They rushed out to look, but by the time they reached the street, he was gone. My parents tried to reassure me. They said maybe he was a parent picking up a kid from somewhere or just a neighbor walking around. But I insisted it felt wrong. He wore this weird formal suit, paced like he was on a mission, and never seemed to look at anyone, yet I was sure he was watching me. My dad suggested we keep an eye out for the car, since I hadn't seen the license plate there wasn't much we could report. For a few days after that, I was on edge at recess. I glanced constantly at the fence. I made excuses to stay close to the teachers or near groups of friends, worried that man might show up again. But he didn't. After a while I started to relax. Maybe it had been a coincidence. Maybe he was just some odd neighbor. Then one afternoon I walked home from the bus stop alone. Most of my friends had stayed late for after-school clubs, so I headed off by myself. The sky was cloudy, which made everything feel gloomy. As I neared my street, I noticed a familiar old sedan parked at the corner. My stomach tightened. I couldn't see anyone inside at first, so I thought maybe I was imagining things. But as I got closer, I realized it was definitely his car. The windows were up and the door was shut. I felt too scared to walk past it on the same side of the street, so I crossed over and tried to hurry by quietly. Just as I was about to pass, I heard a slight squeak from inside the car, like someone shifting in the driver's seat. I didn't dare look directly, but I could sense the movement. That was all I needed. I broke into a run and didn't stop until I reached my driveway. When I turned around, the sedan was still there, but I didn't see him. I had no clue if he was crouched down or if I was losing my mind. That evening my parents took my fear more seriously. My dad said if we saw the car again, we would call the police. We tried to watch for him from our windows, but we never caught him again that night. I barely slept, thinking of him out there in the dark. The next morning I left for school feeling jittery, constantly checking behind me. But over the next week the man never came back, at least not that I saw. The sedan didn't appear at the school fence or on our street. Slowly, day by day, the worry in my chest eased. My parents reassured me that sometimes strange people pass through neighborhoods and it doesn't mean they're out to get anyone. Maybe he'd moved on or had some unrelated reason for being there. I tried to believe it. I was still cautious for a while, but eventually I went back to playing happily at recess. Time passed and I moved on to middle school. As the years rolled by, the memory became a creepy, distant story I told a few close friends. I remember clocking in on a scorching Saturday in early June, feeling excited because it was only my second day back at this electronics store. I had worked there for about a year and a half during the pandemic, but nothing that happened back then compares to what I'm about to share. I grew up in this tough suburb of Seattle where many people live paycheck to paycheck or get mixed up in crime. My parents raised me to stay alert and expect the worst so I could be prepared if it ever happened. Little did I know I would need those lessons sooner than I thought. Even though it was just my second day, I already knew my tasks from my previous time here. We didn't have many employees, maybe around 26 in total, and after 6 p.m. only about 5 of us remained for closing. By 3:30 the store was still busy. A mother came in with 3 little boys and a small dog. She carried a dog travel bag and one of the boys was carrying the dog. One manager, whom I'll call Kevin, decided to put the dog and the boy in our office to avoid health code issues. Only 5 minutes later I heard our intercom code for a theft in progress and watched all the aisles. I saw Kevin, who has long hair like me, make a serious face as he walked out. Suddenly the family was at my register. One boy had the dog in his arms, and another must have slipped out with the bag. Manager Liz hopped on the register behind me, which felt suspicious. Then I heard a kid screaming outside. In a moment Kevin came back, and holding the dog bag, slammed it on a nearby register and unzipped it. Inside were bottles of lotion, rubbing alcohol, and meds, items from aisle 1 that looked like they'd be used for drugs. My mind made the connection, this was probably a drug kit. The mother started yelling at Liz and Kevin. A supervisor, Tanya, rushed over after seeing everything on the cameras. The noise spilled outside, and I heard the kid lying, claiming Kevin had hit him. Then Tanya shouted at the mom that she was calling the cops and Child Protective Services because the mother had filled the bag and told her son to run. Soon the family left, and I peeked back into the bag. It was definitely full of shady items, and it made me nervous. I decided to tell Liz about it once the day was over, since she was the store owner's daughter. Surprisingly, the shift went on like normal, and the incident slipped my mind. By 8 p.m. I got a notice that my register needed more cash, so I called Tanya over the intercom. We chatted about the bills I needed, and I told the other cashier to handle returns and closing tasks. The next moment, as she disappeared into aisle 2, a tall man, maybe 6 feet 1 inch and about 200 pounds, walked in. He wore a black mask, a blue hoodie with a beanie, and ripped jeans. He held something behind his back. I wasn't easily intimidated because I grew up around rough people and I'm fairly strong myself, but something about his bloodshot eyes and the way he stared at me from across the store filled me with dread. I realized this could be connected to the earlier theft. If that bag truly was a drug kit, maybe he was on something. I tried to break the tension and asked, "Hey man, what do you need?" He tilted his head in a creepy way and spoke words I'll never forget. "Are you the only one here with long hair?" It froze me. I calmly said "Excuse me," and he repeated the question. I told him, "I'm not the only one, but why does it matter?" He called me outside and started hurling insults. My nerves spiked because I was the only person in the front, and we were short-staffed at night. This man wanted to hurt me, maybe even kill me, judging by his glare. I tried to stay calm, but my voice shook. "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said. Then manager Tanya arrived, joking at first about how I was making her run around. I pointed at the man and said, "This guy's causing trouble." She instantly stiffened. "What do you want from him?" she asked the man. He repeated his threats, demanded I come outside, and spat out more slurs. It felt like an endless standoff until we managed to signal all the other managers. Some arrived armed with box cutters, which can be nasty if used in self-defense. The man backed up toward a fridge at the front of the store, still hiding something behind his back, then snatched a laptop and bolted. Manager Kevin, who also has long hair, chased after him along with the others. It seemed the man was specifically targeting people with long hair, maybe because he thought one of us had foiled his family's theft earlier. I grabbed the intercom and announced, "All remaining staff to the front now. Lock down the store." We locked the doors while a few customers who understood the seriousness waited inside. I tried to keep them calm. Attention shoppers, please don't worry. The incident is outside. For your safety, avoid the front doors. After a couple of minutes, the managers returned and let us unlock the doors. They said the man might have had a gun but fled once he realized he was outnumbered. I never confirmed if he truly had a weapon, but I was shaken to my core. I asked to shut down my register and leave for the night, and they quickly agreed. We called the police, but the 911 operator refused to send anyone, scolding us for chasing shoplifters. I don't support chasing thieves either, but I was scared. What if I had been hurt or killed? The operator's attitude made me angrier, thinking they didn't care about our safety. I hope that person lost their job. I couldn't sleep that night, imagining what might have happened if things had gone differently. As if the stress wasn't enough, I caught a terrible flu later that night right in the middle of summer and had to spend a week at my aunt's place in the next town. I stayed away from work while I recovered, returning after I felt better. Thankfully, nothing else happened after that, but I can't stop thinking about those kids living in a mess of drugs and danger. I hope Child Protective Services finds them and helps them escape that environment. If there's one lesson I learned, it's to trust your gut. When your instincts tell you you're in danger, get out as fast as you can. I'm grateful I reacted the way I did. My street smarts may have saved my life, and that, for better or worse, is the scariest story from my time at the electronics store in the summer of 2021. In 2015 I was 13 years old. One evening I remember hiding from my father. I don't recall exactly why I hid, but I felt nervous and wanted to be alone. Our spare room seemed like the best place to hide. It was empty and quiet. Most of the time it stayed dark and cold because nobody used it. I slipped inside and shut the door behind me. As soon as I walked in, a chill hit my arms. It felt like the air in there was heavier than in the rest of the house. I turned on a small lamp, but the light was very dim. There was a couch pushed against the far wall. I decided to lie down on it because my legs were tired from standing. My mind wandered, and I started thinking about scary things. I often did that to entertain myself when I was alone, even though it made me a bit jumpy. While I was lying there, I suddenly pictured a terrifying face. It looked like a pale figure with wide, empty eyes and a twisted mouth. I don't usually scare myself with my own thoughts, but this time I felt a jolt of fear. My heartbeat sped up, and I sat up straight, looking around the room. No one was there, of course, but the image stayed in my mind. I closed my eyes and tried to calm down, telling myself it was just my imagination. After a few minutes, I managed to push that scary face out of my head. I settled back onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. The light from the little lamp flickered, which made me tense up again. I thought I heard something in the hallway, like footsteps. My father was probably looking for me, but the footsteps sounded too light, almost like a child's steps. I held my breath and waited. Then the noise stopped, and everything was silent again. I told myself I was imagining things. Still, the silence felt too heavy. I tried to get comfortable, but I felt this prickly sensation on my arms, like someone was watching me. I tried to laugh it off, but the room felt even colder now. I wondered if my father had turned down the heat, or maybe the vent was broken. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and closed my eyes. I thought if I just stayed still and quiet, my father would forget about me, and I could stay there until I felt safe enough to return to my bedroom. Then it happened. I felt a warm hand touching my hand. At first, I assumed it was my own hand resting on top of the other, but when I moved my fingers, I realized that the warm pressure did not move with me. It felt like someone else was holding my hand. My whole body froze. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination again, but it felt too real. In a burst of panic, I yanked my hand away and jumped off the couch. I was shaking so hard that my knees nearly gave out. I held my breath and looked around, but I saw nothing in the dim light. The room was empty, just as before. Yet my heart pounded and my skin felt clammy. I backed up against the wall, staring at the couch, expecting something or someone to appear. The lamp flickered again, and I let out a small gasp. I knew I had to get out of there. My feet felt like lead, but I forced them to move. I rushed to the door and fumbled with the knob. My hand was still trembling, so it took a moment before I could twist it open. As soon as I got the door unlocked, I darted out into the hallway. I ran without looking back, almost tripping over my own feet. I didn't dare slow down until I reached the living room. By then my chest felt tight and I was breathing heavily. I thought about going to my bedroom, but it was upstairs and the hallway there was dark too. I couldn't face another dark space right then, so I stayed in the living room where at least the lights were bright. My father was nowhere to be seen, and I wondered if he had gone to bed. Usually that would have made me feel safer, but my heart was still pounding. I felt alone in a strange way, like I was the only person left awake in the entire house. I sat on the sofa in the living room, holding a pillow against my chest. My mind replayed the moment when that warm hand touched me. It felt so real. I could almost feel the gentle pressure around my fingers. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination or maybe the couch cushion pressing in a weird way, but the memory refused to go away. My body was still tense, and a shiver ran down my spine every time I thought about it. I wanted to forget the whole thing and go back to normal, but I couldn't stop shaking. Eventually I worked up the courage to go upstairs. I ran as fast as I could and flipped on every light. When I finally got to my room, I shut the door and locked it. I remember sitting on my bed for a long time, trying to catch my breath. My room felt safe, but I couldn't help imagining that face again, the one I had pictured on the couch. This time it felt like the face belonged to something real, something that followed me. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking I heard creaks on the stairs or a whisper outside my door. The darkness felt alive, and my heart wouldn't stop racing. I tried to call a friend on my phone, but it was late and nobody answered. I ended up sitting against the wall with the lights on until the sun rose. I am 23 now, and I still feel scared whenever I think about that night. It might sound silly, but I avoid staying in dark rooms by myself. Even if I have to, I keep a light on. Sometimes I wonder if that spare room had something in it. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, but I know how real that warm hand felt when it touched me. I never told my father about that night, and I haven't gone into that spare room since. It all started as a normal day. I remember feeling a small surge of happiness because I was back in my old childhood neighborhood. I had an appointment in the morning, then a few errands, and now I was driving along the side streets that I used to know so well. The sun was high and the roads were almost empty. I like these streets with the old houses and the big trees, even if they were narrow and sometimes tricky. But I also knew some people sped through them, ignoring how tight the space was. As I passed a familiar corner store, I glanced in the rearview mirror. That was when I first noticed the car. It was so close behind me that I doubted you could fit a credit card between our bumpers. Right away I felt annoyed, but the car didn't slow down, didn't back off, just stayed there like it was locked onto me. There was something in that closeness that gave me a chill, though I told myself it was just another impatient driver. I decided to stay at my usual speed. After all, it was a quiet neighborhood, and I had no reason to risk a crash. But then I dared to look at the mirror again. This time I saw the driver. It was an older woman with grayish-silver hair, her face lined with wrinkles. She didn't look strange at first, just like a typical senior woman you might see. But then she bared her teeth, and they were so long and sharp that my breath caught in my throat. I had never seen anything like it. My heart pounded. I jerked my eyes back to the road and tried to breathe. The street around us was silent, no one was walking on the sidewalks, and there were no other cars. We were completely alone. When I glanced back once more, I saw her leaning forward, glaring at me with an angry, almost hateful expression, her teeth still exposed, made her look almost inhuman. I thought about pulling over to let her pass, but my instinct screamed no. We reached a stop sign, and I had to brake. She stopped too, but her car was still so close behind me, as if she refused to leave any space. I felt trapped. My skin tingled, and I swallowed hard. I tried to stay calm. I inched forward from the stop sign, expecting her to turn onto another road, but she didn't. She followed me exactly, never breaking the tight formation. Finally I reached the street I needed to turn on. I turned the wheel, and for a moment I lost sight of her in my mirror. Then I heard the screech of tires as her car shot forward and sped away down the main road. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to keep driving. I told myself it was just a crazy, angry driver, but deep inside I couldn't shake the memory of those teeth and the look in her eyes. I tried to calm down as I continued on my way. I was almost at my old childhood home where I planned to stop for a moment to take in some memories. My parents had moved out years ago, but I still liked to drive by once in a while. I told myself everything was fine and that nothing supernatural had happened. Maybe I had just imagined her teeth were that long. I arrived at the old house and parked at the curb. The windows were boarded up and the paint was peeling, but the place still felt familiar. I took a moment to breathe. I stepped out of my car to stretch my legs. That was when I heard something behind me, the soft sound of a car engine slowing down. Instinctively, I turned around. There was the same car, that same dull color, rolling by so slowly that it felt deliberate. As it passed, the older woman turned her head and looked right at me. She bared her teeth again, and they looked even longer this time. There was no doubt in my mind now, those teeth were wrong, almost animalistic, and her eyes were cold and furious. I froze. Then she sped off, leaving me standing in front of my childhood home, my heart pounding so hard that I could feel it in my ears. I didn't know what else to do, so I got back in my car. I decided I should leave the neighborhood and head home. But before I could reach the main road, I saw her car parked in front of a small convenience store on the corner. She was nowhere in sight. Despite my fear, curiosity tugged at me. I thought about driving away, but something made me slow down. Maybe I wanted to see if she was just a normal person after all. I parked across the street and watched the door of the store. Soon she came out. She looked completely ordinary from a distance, just an older woman carrying a small bag. But the moment she spotted me, she paused. Her lips parted in a slow, unsettling grin, revealing those strange, long teeth once more. My entire body went cold. I couldn't handle it. I started my car again and pulled away, careful not to speed but desperate to escape her gaze. I headed toward the main avenue, trying to convince myself this was all in my head. But as I approached the last set of lights, I noticed my fuel gauge was low. I needed gas before getting onto the highway, so I stopped at a local gas station. While pumping gas, I kept looking around nervously. Everyone else there seemed normal, regular people going about their day. I felt silly for being so scared, but I couldn't help it. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a reflection in the station store window. That same woman was standing across the street, staring in my direction. She was too far for me to make out her expression, but I recognized her outline. My fear spiked again. I knew I had to leave right away. I jumped into my car, not even bothering to collect my receipt, and sped out of there. My drive home was a blur. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting her to appear behind me. By the time I reached my driveway, I was shaking. I ran inside and locked the door. I tried to relax, turning on every light in my small house. I told myself over and over that it was just a weird encounter. Maybe she had dentures that looked unusual. Maybe she enjoyed scaring people. Or maybe it was something else, something not of this world. This happened back in 2022. I applied for a remote proofreading job via LinkedIn with a known company, or at least I thought it was. I was contacted via email by a gentleman named Robert to find out my availability for an interview. So I interviewed over Skype and then with Nathan, which was just a series of questions. I never actually talked to him. This should have been the first red flag, I know. Nathan advised me several minutes after submitting my answers to the review team that I was hired. I completed a $1,099 with my name and address only and signed a contract. I was then advised I needed to have a check sent to me, which I would sign and deposit into my account, then use the funds toward a workstation required for the job and pay a vendor with it. The $3,000 check from the company showed as available in my personal checking account right away, so I relied on the bank to see that the funds were available and thought they could be used. I asked the vendor, whose name was Anna, via text to make payments in increments to equal the $3,000. 2 were made through Zelle for $500 each to an individual, then 1 through Venmo for $1,000 to another individual. I did not know either of them personally. I know what you're probably thinking, how could you be so stupid? I knew the money from the $3,000 check was not my own, but I thought I could pay the remainder of what was due to the vendor from the check and still have the existing funds that were already in my account. If I knew the funds were not yet available, I would never have made any further transactions. This was all over Labor Day weekend in 2022. I received a call from the bank the day after Labor Day advising me the check was fraudulent, and there was a hold placed on the check. In the meantime, my checking account balance had gone into the negative. I was advised by them not to communicate with any of the individuals involved and to file a police report, which I did the same day. I received an email from Robert and a text from Anna about sending the rest of the funds and the workstation to be shipped to my home address. Needless to say, I did not respond to their request, nor did I hear from them again. I kept all of the correspondence and filed reports with several agencies. I am employed full-time and was in the midst of trying to earn some additional income during some hard times, particularly while COVID was still ramped up. I failed to recognize the signs of a scam and was caught in a weak moment because the day of my interview was my late grandmother's birthday, so I took my new hire as a good sign. My wife and I are a one-income household, and she is disabled and still in the process of applying for federal benefits. I was trying to do what I could to make ends meet, and this really hurt us. The whole situation still has us very upset and makes me especially feel like a failure. After all this time, I needed to reach out to the crisis hotline as the situation has been very traumatizing. I had also taken some time off from my job after it happened. I have anxiety and depression for which I am treated, which have worsened since this event occurred. The agencies I filed the report with either did not contact me back or were unable to help me. I followed up with the police, and they were unable to do anything further for me, just advising that I contact the Attorney General's office, which I already had. I tried working with my bank, but they informed me that since the Venmo and Zelle activity was initiated and authorized by me, the dispute claims for both were denied. Evidently there's a regulation known as Reg E that does not provide protections for consumers in the event of authorized payments resulting from scams. Therefore, as far as I know, the Skype account, the Venmo account, and the Zelle account for all of the individuals involved are still active. I do not know all of the steps that the police took with this issue, what protocol was followed, or if they just concluded this likely occurred overseas, as the officer assigned to my case mentioned. I realize this situation is not as big as many of the other issues the police encounter, but I was hoping a more thorough investigation would have been conducted. Scammers therefore continue to get away with their misdeeds. I understand that there was no unauthorized activity in my accounts and that I initiated these payments. However, I never would have done so if I knew these were fraudsters and part of a scam. Electronically, the funds showed up as available on my mobile app, which is misleading. If I knew they were unavailable, it would have delayed me from making any transactions until I heard back from my bank that the check was fraudulent. I paid a heavy price for it against my better judgment, since I am out $2,000. I have since taken additional measures and am much more cautious when applying for and researching online jobs. I was able to find a stable and legitimate part-time position and get back on track with my life for the most part, but I'd be lying if I told you this whole issue doesn't haunt me whenever I think about it. I never had anything like this happen to me before, nothing that at least involved money being stolen from me. You can add insult to injury, but trust me, I've heard it a lot since this happened and wish it never did. I wanted to share my story because I don't want to see what happened to me happen to anyone else.